We are an independent Catholic school. Our patron saint, obviously, is St. Thomas More. I'll say a little bit more about that later, but the person that we really follow in terms of the moral formation is St. John Bosco. I had never heard of John Bosco before I found out about STMA, but he's the founder of the Salesian model, and really the idea is constant formation is what Bosco talks about. So the faculty are with the students all the time. There's no faculty lounge that we go hide in. We are with the students before school and in classes, and of course, and then during lunch and then after school. And so, whether that's eating lunch with them or playing basketball with them at lunch, I coach boys and girls soccer, so I'm with them there. All the faculty are intimately involved with them throughout the day. And really the basic idea is that we're supposed to love them and make sure that they know we love them, and to be in rightly ordered friendships with them and to build those relationships over the years. And so we don't have a huge faculty. I think there's about 15 of us, a few part-timers, and so that means we all do a lot of things. So I teach a bunch of classes, and I do admissions, and I do college applications, and I do hiring, and I also train the teachers, and I coach soccer, and I do discipline as well. So anyway, that it's busy, but that's how that's supposed to work. And so really we love them and we show attention to them. And I'll come back to that in a moment. But let me begin, I guess. So we accept as given Dr. Hunter's observations about the necessity of an authoritative community for moral formation. Not only would it be rude and a little silly to accept this invitation and not do so, but we also truly share this conviction. In our case, an event several years ago revealed that, despite appearances, the necessary characteristics of such a community did not actually obtain at STMA. One might expect that establishing and maintaining such a community would be a relatively simple matter for a private school whose mission and identity explicitly situate the school in the tradition of a larger, well-defined moral body with a clearly established authoritative hierarchy and whose constituent families choose the school for precisely this reason. However, we have learned that solidarity must not be taken for granted. School administration and students' parents serve as overlapping magisteria in students' formation. Dissonance between the two can be difficult to discern given common vocabulary and ostensible shared commitment to well-defined moral truths. So, Mr. Brooks, you asked about vocabulary and language yesterday. This is actually something that you would think would be wonderful for us, and in many ways it is, but it's also a challenge. And I'm going to come back to this at the end as well. And this idea of the shared narrative, it really is important. But one of the real challenges, hypocrisy was mentioned earlier, is that when families preach this language all the time in a maybe in a hyper sort of way, and don't live it and don't embody it, then what happens is all the stories and all the language gets distorted. And so then when we are as acting in the students see in concert with the parents and using the same language, this can be a real problem. So I know there's at least one Walker Percy scholar in the room, but so I want to be careful exactly how I say this. I don't remember where he exactly talks about this, but the idea of words being evacuated of their meaning. And I think of the Love in the Ruins a lot, because we have this really rich moral tradition. We want to use these words and we want to claim these words. On the other hand, it presents a challenge sometimes. So I'll come back to that more at the end if I have time. So when students perceive a conflict, whether in explicit teaching or attitude, implicit commitment, or inconsistent practice, their behavior will tend to indicate whose authority they consider to have priority. Students can't and won't serve two masters. To quote Dr. Hunter, people shaped in relation to commanding truths as presiding presences can neither expunge nor cross certain boundaries, and if they were to try, they would do so in the face of serious consequences. When the school is perceived to lack the authority to bind and loose in the face of parental challenge, students will tend to disregard, if not despise, the former in favor of the latter. Neglecting to secure this authority in documents and through consistent practice will attenuate subsequent moral formation. The failure of iterative formation interventions may more often indicate disputed authority rather than poorly conceived or conveyed corrective measures. And so this is really my thesis, the most important thing that I want to highlight. A classical Catholic school will be intentionally and necessarily countercultural. As such, the school will, to quote the novelist Julian Barnes, sail in seas of contrary tides. We've discerned three general ways parents will manifest as contrary. To the extent the students' families are immersed in the wider culture, they will stand in latent, ambient opposition to the school's mission. But absent explicit challenge to the school's formation efforts, they won't constitute a threat to the school's authority. Chronic antagonists will insist on solidarity of mission and endorse common language, but will regularly present with concerns about execution and application of school policies and orthodoxy, whether that be political, religious, moral, or otherwise, in the classroom. And let me just recommend a small book to you. It's called When Sheep Attack. I can't remember the author. It's a former Protestant minister. And he documents this pattern in churches that tear churches apart. And some of you that are members of Protestant churches will know about this. And this language of concerns is always the way that these antagonists present. It's remarkable how accurate it is. So these two, though, these chronic antagonists, won't compromise the school's moral authority as long as they are not seen to achieve concessions or allowed to persist in non-compliance without sanction. I'll say more about that later as well. Acute antagonists do, however, constitute a threat because they are often publicly perceived as in solidarity prior to their emergence as antagonists. This perception of solidarity, which tends to confirm their implicit moral legitimacy, coupled with the strength and swiftness of their action, has the potential to lend initial plausibility to their charges, which are framed as defending the true interpretation and application of shared moral commitments. Precisely because their antagonism is a direct reaction to the school administration's exercise of authority and execution of policy, they have the potential to undermine the legitimacy of the administration's authority as arbiters of moral truth within the tradition and thereby weaken the integrity of the moral community. And this is where I have to say St. Thomas More is a patron saint, and his fate that he met at the hands of King Henry VIII, his former friend, it resonates with us always. If you know the story, you'll know what I'm talking about. The precipitating event that exposed a critical lack of solidarity and institutional vulnerabilities happened in the spring of 2013. A senior boy was found incontrovertibly to have solicited and recorded a sexual encounter with a freshman girl. The boy then shared this recording electronically with classmates. Given the ages of the involved parties, criminal charges were a distinct possibility. Upon discovery and investigation, STMA's administration submitted a recommendation of expulsion to the school's board. The offending student's parents retained legal representation and approached the board with the challenge that the school had no such authority, given that the school's handbook did not specify this as a possible sanction, nor did it detail procedures for reaching such decisions, and they actually threatened to sue the school. The Parents' Council explicitly challenged the school's authority to determine membership in the community. Moreover, the parents' complaint also alleged that by levying this extreme sanction and denying the student a second chance or the parents a right to appeal, the school's administration had themselves been guilty of violating the school's governing rule of charity. So the rule of the school that governs everything is love of God, love of neighbor. Thus, not only did the parents call into question the administration's executive authority, they also called into question the administration's legitimacy as authentic subsidiaries within the church's moral tradition. With the help of counsel and the board, STMA's administration was able to reach resolution in the particular matter, and the student did not return to school. However, the incident revealed, upon reflection, the need to strengthen the school's handbook by codifying the administration's authority to remove students, as well as the procedures for doing so. The first round of significant revisions was largely effective. At the very least, there have been no similar challenges of acute antagonism in response to administrative sanctions of egregious student behavior. It is possible that we have made a type 1 error in this case. Though there haven't been similar challenges, there have also been no equivalent violations, thank God. However, there have been strong sanctions, such as long suspensions, without any strong dispute. The 2013 incident and its aftermath prompted us to be vigilant and regularly attend to discerning the integrity of administrative authority in our school community. Due to this learned alertness, we are able to diagnose the persistence of relatively low-level academic and social misbehavior among certain cohorts of students as an indication of perceived lack of authority rather than inept or inarticulate local formation. And so our model relies, though, on solidarity with the parents. So we will start with conversations with students. We call them local formation. And there'll just be an email to the parents saying, hey, I talked to your son about so-and-so. This was his response. Thank you for support. There's no real sanction at this point. Most of the time, this works. When it doesn't work, though, it's because the parents aren't supporting on the other side. So in these cases, parents were actively working against the school's formation attempts and empowering students to contravene school norms. Because the violations were themselves relatively minor, and the handbook only indicated escalating sanctions for magnitude of violations rather than quantity, the chronic misbehavior signaled institutional weakness and emboldened parents who would assert themselves as rival authorities within the community. Though the subset of the student population who posed these challenges was small, their negative influence among their peers was wide. Because of students' tendency toward peer orientation, one manifestation of which is their reluctance to speak to adults about disruption in their cohort, and I refer to this as omerta because it really seems to be concrete. Those few who explicitly resisted formation wielded some perverse authority around acceptable activities and enthusiasms. Classroom engagement, participation in certain extracurriculars, and general good cheer all suffered as a result of the presence of these negative cells. Furthermore, because there were no established grounds for escalation, repeated formation interventions and conversations with contentious parents consumed vast amounts of administrative time. Given dual roles at STMA, consumed administrative time is also consumed teaching time. So whenever I'm in the meetings with the parents, it's typically I'm being drawn out of a class. Revisions to the handbook before the 2016-17 school year specifically addressed these weak spots. This year, with clear protocols for escalation, repeat interventions, notices, and related meetings with parents have diminished precipitously. Indicators of goodwill in the community at large, such as applications and retention, are strong. Administrative and teaching time are more productive during school hours, reducing the amount of time devoted to the second shift each night. Well, some of you will know about this. You go home, then you start work all over again. Engagement, especially among the younger students, is noticeably improved. Attributing all of this to a strengthened handbook could also be a type 1 error, but in the absence of other changes in language, practice, or personnel, there are no competing explanations for the positive changes. Let me just say one more word, though, about these chronic antagonists, because I think this is something that's really important. Walker Percy talks about like I said, the words being evacuated of their meaning. C.S. Lewis and G.K. Chesterton both talk about reframing the teaching of the Christianity in exotic terms with the Tao. The beginning of everlasting man, he talks about this idea of it were presented as some sort of Eastern religion, which is, of course, in many ways it actually is, that people would perceive it with new eyes. But this is a real challenge for us. These students that contravene the norms, and then it was really interesting, Rabbi, when you're talking about the parents coming to their rescue. They do appreciate this coming to the rescue, but it's not their appealing to their parents isn't really, as far as I can tell, loyalty to their parents' version, but rather it's the easy way out. It's a way to get away with things. They disagree with their parents' teaching as well, but it is a way to find some solidarity with their parents who are usually all over their case and making their lives miserable at home. So there's this, what we see is this Pharisaism, essentially, where all the language is used, but it's without any real love. And so then when we talk about love and charity and we try to model this at school, it's met with, I think, some cynicism and some doubt. One of the words I would use is often it seems that students are inoculated against the moral formation, and in a literal sense because they've been given a dead version of the faith. And so when they're sort of immune to the live strain, now we don't despair, that's a sin, and we love them anyway, but it does make it really, really difficult to break through. And I do think a lot of times this language of planting seeds is what we strive for. We think, well, at the very least, at some point in their lives, they'll remember that place was different. They actually did love us. What was it he talked about? And maybe that will have an effect. And so, well, I suppose I'll stop there. So thank you.